Welcome to this week's episode of Mind Power Meets Mystic. It is the 2024-2025 New Year's coming up this week, and Cinthia and I are here to celebrate with you. I am Michelle Walters. I am the Mind Power of Mind Power Meets Mystic, and Cinthia Varkevisser is our show Mystic. So we talked a few weeks ago about generosity and giving, and what a great thing that was. And we wanted to follow up that episode, especially as we head into 2025, thinking about receiving, because you can't have giving without receiving. And yet, Cinthia and I have both observed in our personal and professional lives that receiving is not so easy, not for everybody, not all the time. And so we wanted to have a little chat about it.
Absolutely. What we found is that it's so much easier. I think what happened is we bought into this thing that we grew up with, which is it is better to give than to receive. Now, there's some merit to it. However, that's not a complete statement. It's not a complete truth. And we'd love for everyone to just see how amazing receiving can be for everyone involved. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Well, and put another way, receiving is essential.
It is. It is absolutely imperative that we receive and that we receive with gratitude. But now we're getting ahead of ourselves, or at least I'm getting ahead of us.
Absolutely.
So let's
Where would
talk
you
about
like to
this.
start? Yes.
Why don't you open it up because I love your first tip on receiving.
So, my first tip on receiving comes from my upcoming book, The ABCs of Conscious Leadership, which is coming out in February 2025. One of the things that I talk about in my book is that N is for noticing. And noticing and listening are highly, highly related. I think of noticing and listening as being fundamental traits of people, and specifically of conscious leaders, because if you're not paying attention, then you're not receiving on the receiving end of things. Listening is a gift, right? I mean, nobody wants to talk to somebody who's not paying enough attention to listen to them. People want you, when somebody wears shiny shoes to a party, then she probably wants you to notice them. And the gift of a smile, the gift of being, um, having somebody repeat back to you what you've said, these are all ways that we demonstrate receiving, really, by taking an interest in our environment and by showing that interest to the people, and I guess the pets and critters and the plants probably all around us. I'm a nature girl.
Yes, you are. We'll talk about that in a second on our little conversation that we had before uh, our our podcast. I am so in agreement with you, Michelle. Receiving for me on the woo-woo end is a way to open up an energy exchange. What we see is that when people argue, they stop listening because they're so invested in getting their point across. And so then you see two people talking at each other, and then with frustration, it starts escalating. If one person can receive, it gives the other person two things. One is the acknowledgement, just like you said, either repeating back or this is the way I understand what you're saying, or good point, or I hear what you're saying. And so what happens is that it's not being it's not hitting a wall of resistance. There's an acceptance and then there's an exchange. And that is true communication, is receiving information and then sharing information. And if you think of it as an infinity, right? You receive information from one chakra and it goes out another chakra. And it's actually really, really beautiful. So that's the beauty for receiving for me, especially when it comes to communication.
Absolutely. It's essential, right? Like, who wants to go through life when nobody ever listens to you? That's no good. It
No,
is this pattern of exchange. And it's funny, as you're talking about it, I just saw Wicked. Have you seen Wicked yet?
no,
You
no,
got
no.
to go see Wicked.
I
But what
know.
I what makes me think about Wicked is that Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West, wears these eyeglasses that have the shape of the infinity on them, right?
Oh.
And so it's kind of a subconscious thing. Like, I don't know who pays attention to stuff like that. I do.
Mhm.
But that infinity, right? That giving, going and backing forth, the kind of that wave of both, you can't just give, you have to receive too. And sometimes I think that's as easy as just saying thank you.
Right,
I think also when we're going to talk about sort of it's better to give than receive. I think an awful lot of us developed a habit as kids that somebody says, "Oh, gee, I like your shoes." Oh, they're really nothing.
right.
That's not the way to receive. If you don't know what else to say, just say thank you.
No, I
You
get
don't have
it.
to you don't have to go into other things, but definitely do not deprecate yourself in the process. Just say thank you.
And here, let me add a little bit to that. And I got this from my daughter, who is an MFT, right? A licensed marriage family therapist. Is that when you say thank you actually need to take a breath or two before you can say anything else. Because thank you is also a way of deflecting, just like what you said, Michelle, like,
Oh,
oh,
can
these
be.
little
Yeah.
things, right? Or I like to say I got these on sale, or there's a story to it. But to just say thank you and to really let it get into your body, it's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable, especially when it's personal. But if you can just say thank you and let it just, you know, ease into your body a little bit, that is receiving,
Well, and that takes us to the next one, right?
right?
What's the next one on our list, Cynthia?
Well, the one for me is that receiving allows someone else to be generous. And there are a lot of people who really don't know how to be generous. And so they have to figure it out. If this is not something that we get to read in books, this is actually an experiential way of learning. And there are so many times where we say, oh, don't worry, I can take care of it. Like someone's opening up the door for you, or something as simple as, I'll pick this up for you. It's the act of someone getting to be generous. And being generous feels so good because you feel abundant. You feel like you have this and more to give. And so, what I like to tell people, especially my clients, is receiving is a the biggest act of generosity because you're allowing someone to be something that they not normally are. What about for you, my friend?
Well, I think I just want to take that just one step further, which is like we all know. I mean, like how many times have you been told, do your gratitudes every day, be thankful. If you're thankful, then you're in the right vibration. Da, 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 da. Well, you know what? You can't be thankful for something if you never receive anything. So, it is important to actually receive. And receiving, whether that is receiving by noticing a beautiful sunrise or somebody buys you something you always wanted for your Christmas present, or receiving by looking forward, setting an intention of receiving in the next year. I think these are all ways that you open the door to opportunities for gratitude. And uh, I don't, I don't, I don't emphasize gratitudes with all of my clients, but I do need to emphasize gratitudes with some number of my clients because it is very easy in this complex world we get spun up in to lose track of the fact that many of us have lives that are pretty good.
Right.
And you got to remember that. I drove through Oakland the other day, not the best part of Oakland, the part of Oakland that, you don't really want to drive through as a visitor to Oakland. There are a lot of people with a lot less than me. I need to be grateful.
Right. Other things that happen is when we talk about gratitudes is we all have pretty traumatic things happen to us in our lives. And when we are in the act of receiving or in the space of receiving, we actually get to see the miracles that happen for us. And I don't think we emphasize that enough. And yes, we can talk about it as a gratitude, there are also these synchronicities that happen that allow us to experience whatever it is that we need to experience. I mean, mine is my brother's death and how I got to meet the people in his life and get to see how many people just loved and adored him. And I know that you see a lot of miracles, especially with the challenges that you've had in your life. So it's if we're in the space of receiving, we can actually see how something greater is happening for us.
Absolutely. Well, and this seems like a good time to bring up my other book,
Yes.
the book I wrote a few years ago called An Alignment of Spirit Finding Work You Love. That book is a book all about manifesting and the law of attraction. And the examples are about finding work, but the application of what I'm talking about is so much greater. It's not just about finding a great job, it's about finding manifesting things, which I seem to have gotten pretty good at. And one of the steps that I outline in my book is the step of receiving. And I felt it was necessary to incorporate it because there's just that many people who neglect receiving.
Right.
And it's that important.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
It's that important.
What else do we want to talk about with receiving?
Well, my last one for receiving is related to another topic from my upcoming ABCs of Conscious Leadership book, which is O is for openness. I think being an open person, open minded, open to new ideas, open to new relationships, open to new ways of doing things is essential for our growth and the well being of humanity and our planet. And that openness takes you into a place of receiving. So being open to taking a trip, going a new place, being open to trying the new coffee shop. Because why? Because it's new. Um, those opportunity, meet somebody new, have coffee or talk to somebody at a party you've never talked to before. Those opening of places and ideas enable us all to receive more. And in that receiving, we empower more giving, and it's cyclical and it builds and it builds and it builds.
I agree. Now, in
And
spiritual,
who doesn't like to take a trip or go to a new coffee shop? I don't know anybody.
I don't either. I don't either. As a matter of fact, it's really funny. I have a an old mentee, as in martial arts, we mentor and then we mentor kids and then they go off to college. And I'm really fortunate that my collegiate mentees come back and they visit this old fart. And I said, hey, let's go eat Ethiopian. And my mentee says, haven't tried it, but I would love to try it. And
There
I
you
thought,
go.
that's fantastic, right? Being open. In the spiritual shit disturber world, being open has to do with trust. And what I find with a lot of empaths is that they don't trust. And then I know that I'll get pushback on this. So hear me out and let's have convo after that. What I find is a lot of my clients have a really hard time with receiving because they're so used to giving, there's a mistrust in receiving. They'll usually start tallying up like, oh, they just did something really nice for me. And instead of just sitting in that receiving and saying, wow, I feel so loved and this person's so generous, that they're already thinking about how can I return the favor? And it's not a favor, it's a generosity. There's a difference, right? So and that's how friendships are made. Friendships are made on a million generosities back and forth. That is not mine. That is Michelle Obama's. I'll take it. Um, and so for us and openness, what I invite the empathic community to do is just trust that we deserve this gift, this generosity, that we are worthy. It helps with our worthiness. It actually builds our well or replenishes us so that we can even give on a bigger level. It elevates our work because from a confidence standpoint, as well as the person who's helping you becomes your collab partner or your sister or your brother, your sibling, and and then you unite. We actually end up uniting through trust than we do through anything else. I remember way back in the day when I started playing competitive soccer, my coach was kind of a jerk. And he's like, I want to be the common denominator so that if you guys don't get along, at least you can all be mad at me. And I appreciate that, but that doesn't work. Isn't that total like 70s and 80s thinking, right?
It is. It's not really today's thinking.
No, and I love that this is, let's, steer the ship together. Let's have a day. And so this is a perfect opportunity, my friends, to be open and trust that we're worthy and trust that good things come from good things.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, it is foundational to my Law of Attraction book that you have to have faith and you have to trust.
Right.
And there are people who do that pretty easily, and there are people who just can't get it together. And I'm not saying that they can't ever in their lifetimes, but they're in some sort of a mindset, or they've been grieving, or they've got something going on that they can't get to the place of believing that something can happen. And you have to find a way to shore up your belief in order for that manifesting to take place.
Agreed. Agreed.
But I hear you, Cynthia, on your observation that there are a fair number of people in kind of the empath or spiritual communities that are are obsessed is too strong a word, but who are
Fixated.
fixating, who are over extending their outward energy,
Right.
um, as opposed to, recognizing that this needs to be a cycle, right? It needs to be a cycle.
Right. There are groups out that, like, one is Healing Heroes. I think that's what they're called. And Healers Healing Healers. These are all amazing groups. And what they're doing is that they're taking time to do an exchange, giving and receiving. And I think that's fabulous. And wouldn't it be incredible if we all just did that as a practice? And that the biggest part of the practice is to receive with an open heart, knowing that it is a form of generosity. What a great world we'd be in. What a great 2025. Let's just put it
It
that
would
way.
certainly make 2025 a whole different ballgame, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, so I think for our listeners, we want to encourage both the generosity and the receiving. And if you didn't take a listen to our generosity episode, we can put a link for it in our show notes. And thank you. I want to make sure that we are acknowledging and thanking our listeners from 2024 and 2023 and even 2022, for hanging with us and for being part of the Mind Power Meets Mystic community. If you have not liked or followed or reviewed our show, we would greatly, greatly appreciate your subscriptions, your follows, and your input. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mind Power Meets Mystic, and happy 2025.